Please don't let them take my mommy." The words were so small that the midnight wind nearly carried them away, but Vincent Marino heard them through 12 inches of oak, 3 locked iron bars, and 600 years of silence. He stood alone in the entrance hall of Marino Castle, one hand resting against the ancient door, listening to the heartbeat on the other side. Fast, fragile, human. No human had climbed the mountain road after sunset in more than a century. None had reached the castle gates alive with enough courage left to knock. Yet the sound came again, 3 soft taps, not demanding, not angry, desperate. Vincent should have summoned a guard. He should have returned to the council chamber, where 7 vampire nobles waited to argue over laws older than the country itself. Instead, he unlocked the door with his own hand. Cold air swept into the hall. Rain whispered across the stone steps. Beneath the black archway stood a little girl in a yellow coat, soaked from hood to shoes. She could not have been older than 7. Mud covered her sneakers. One sleeve was torn at the cuff. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, and both hands were wrapped around a silver locket at her throat. She looked up at Vincent without screaming. That surprised him more than the knock. Most adults forgot how to breathe when they saw him. Vincent was 6 feet 4 inches tall, dressed in a black suit that seemed to absorb the candlelight. His face had not aged since the winter of 1742. His eyes, usually grey, carried the faint red glow of an immortal who had been disturbed without warning. The child only swallowed and asked, "Are you the man who lives here?" Vincent glanced beyond her. The forest stretched for miles under the storm, empty except for the narrow road twisting down toward Hollow Creek. No car, no flashlight, no adult voice calling her name. "How did you reach this door?" he asked. His voice was calm, but the flames in the wall sconces bent toward him. The girl looked back at the darkness. "I walked." "From where?" "Our house near Bennett Road." Vincent knew the place. It was almost 8 miles away. "Alone?" She nodded. Her lower lip trembled, but she did not cry. "Mom told me to run if the lights went out. She said not to stop until I found the castle." Vincent's gaze dropped to the locket. A tiny symbol had been carved into its surface, a crown surrounded by a circle of thorns. The same symbol was hidden beneath the floor of his throne room. The same symbol had been erased from every history book in the Night Court. For the first time in decades, Vincent felt his pulse move. Once. Hard. "What is your name?" "Emily Bennett." The surname struck the hall like a bell. Behind him, somewhere deep inside the castle, an ancient clock began to chime midnight. 1, 2, 3. With every note, the silver locket grew warmer in Emily's hands. A faint red light slipped between her fingers. She gasped and nearly dropped it. Vincent caught the locket before it fell. The instant his skin touched the silver, every candle in the entrance hall went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A low sound moved through the stone beneath their feet, not thunder but something older, like the castle itself had awakened from a long sleep. Emily reached for him without thinking. Her small hand closed around 2 of his fingers. Vincent looked down at her. She was cold, exhausted and frightened, yet she had crossed 8 miles of mountain road because someone she loved had told her this door would open. "Mr. Marino," she whispered. Somehow knowing his name, "They came for my mum." The front gates slammed shut behind her. Torches flared to life along the walls, burning crimson instead of gold. Footsteps rushed through the corridor as the castle guards finally sensed what had happened. Vincent did not look away from Emily. "Who came for Julia Bennett?" Emily's eyes widened. "How do you?" Vincent could answer. The ancient crest above the doorway cracked down the center. A line of red light spread across the stone, forming words in a language no living human was supposed to know. "Blood remembers. The debt remains." Vincent read the message once. Then he slowly removed his coat and placed it around Emily's shaking shoulders. 600 years of law told him to send her away. 600 years of instinct told him she had brought danger to his kingdom. But a promise made before America had a name spoke louder than both. Vincent stepped aside and opened the path into the castle. "Come inside, Emily Bennett," he said. "No one will take your mother while I still rule the night." Emily stepped across the threshold, and the castle doors closed behind her with a deep final sound. Warmth should have greeted her, but Marino Castle held a different kind of cold, the stillness of a place that had forgotten laughter. Vincent led her past towering portraits and black marble columns while crimson flames followed them along the walls. Emily kept both hands wrapped around his coat, which nearly touched the floor around her ankles. She did not ask about the guards who appeared from the shadows. She did not stare at their pale faces or their silver eyes. She only asked, "Can we go now?" Vincent stopped beneath a chandelier made of dark crystal. "First, you will tell me exactly what happened." A woman in a charcoal dress approached carrying a towel and a cup of warm milk. Emily flinched when she came close. Vincent noticed. "This is Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "She has cared for this house longer than your grandmother has been alive. She will not hurt you." Mrs. Whitmore knelt and offered the towel without touching her. Emily accepted it slowly. "My mum said strangers should not touch children without asking," she whispered. "Your mother is wise," Vincent replied. The words sounded unfamiliar in his voice. Emily dried her face, then looked down at the glowing locket. "The power went out after dinner. Mum thought it was the storm, but our neighbours still had lights. Then a black car stopped outside." Vincent's expression did not change, but every guard in the hall became still. Emily continued. "3 people came to the porch. They wore grey coats. One of them asked for Julia Bennett. Mum told me to go upstairs. I listened from the hallway. 6 hours earlier, Julia had been washing dishes in the small kitchen of their rented house near Bennett Road. The place had peeling white paint, a leaking window, and a heater that groaned whenever the temperature dropped below 40 degrees. Julia worked mornings at Hollow Creek Elementary and evenings at a grocery store 3 nights a week. She was 29, always tired, and somehow still able to make pancakes shaped like stars on Sunday mornings. That evening, she had helped Emily finish a science worksheet before placing 2 bowls of tomato soup on the table. "Do castles have electricity?" Emily had asked. Julia had smiled. "The old one on the mountain probably has everything except friendly neighbors." Then the lights died. Julia's smile disappeared. She looked toward the window before the car even reached the driveway, as though she had been waiting for that sound for years. She moved quickly, pulling a chair beneath the kitchen cabinet and taking down a small wooden box. Inside was the silver locket Emily now carried. "Put this on," Julia had said. Her hands were steady, but her face had turned pale. "Do not take it off." "Why? Because it belongs to our family." The knock came moments later. Julia crouched in front of Emily and held both of her shoulders. "Listen carefully. Go through the back door. Follow the old road into the woods. It will lead uphill to a stone gate." Emily had begun to cry. "I do not want to leave you." Julia pressed her forehead gently against her daughter's. "You are not leaving me. You are getting help." She gave Emily one final instruction. "Knock 3 times. Tell the man who answers that Julia Bennett remembers the promise." In the castle hall, Vincent lowered his gaze. "Did you say those exact words at the door?" Emily shook her head. "I forgot. I was scared." Vincent looked toward the crest glowing above the entrance. The castle had remembered for her. "What happened after you ran?" he asked. Emily's fingers tightened around the cup. "Mom locked the back door behind me. I heard someone ask where the child was. Then Mom shouted for me to keep going." Mrs. Whitmore covered her mouth. Vincent turned toward the captain of his guard. "Search Bennett Road quietly. No human authorities. No council messengers." The captain bowed but hesitated. "Your Majesty, the Night Council is waiting. Then they will continue waiting." Vincent faced Emily again. "Did your mother ever speak about this castle before tonight?" Emily thought for a moment. "Only once. She said the safest place in the world can look frightening from far away." Something moved behind Vincent's eyes, a memory too old to show itself completely. He reached for the locket, then stopped before touching it. "Emily, may I see it?" She nodded. The moment she placed it in his palm, the locket opened by itself. Inside was a tiny painted portrait of a woman standing beside a younger Vincent Marino. On the opposite side, 4 words had been engraved into the silver. "When darkness comes, knock." Vincent stared at them in silence. Julia had not sent her daughter toward a legend. She had sent her to a man she believed would keep his word. Vincent closed the locket and held it beneath the red light of the wall torches. The painted woman beside him had been gone for more than 150 years, yet he remembered the winter coat she wore, the snow caught in her hair, and the quiet certainty in her voice when she made him promise that her family would never stand alone. Her name had been Eleanor Bennett. She had found him near death after a fire destroyed the old Marino estate, and instead of turning away, she had hidden him in her cellar until sunrise passed. Vincent had offered gold. Eleanor had refused. She asked for only one thing: protection if darkness ever came for her bloodline. Vincent had believed the promise would outlive the danger. He had been wrong. Footsteps approached from the eastern corridor. 7 figures entered the hall in formal black clothing, each wearing the silver crest of the Night Council. Their arrival lowered the temperature around them. At the front walked Councillor Adrian Vale, tall, white-haired and calm in the way of men who believed patience was another form of power. His gaze moved from Vincent to Emily, then to the locket. "A human child stands inside the royal residence," Adrian said. "Without council approval." Emily moved closer to Mrs. Whitmore. Vincent noticed but did not look away from the counselor. She entered under my protection. The law does not recognize personal protection when the castle wards have been activated. Then the law will learn. Silence spread through the entrance hall. No one spoke to Vincent Marino that way. No one challenged Adrian Vale so openly. The counselor folded his hands behind his back. The wards have not awakened in 3 centuries. A human crossed the gate. The royal crest opened. The blood inscription appeared. We require an explanation. You require patience. Adrian's eyes narrowed. And the child? Vincent turned slightly, placing himself between Emily and the council. Her name is Emily Bennett. The surname moved through the group like cold wind through dry leaves. One councilwoman whispered, "That line ended generations ago." "Clearly it did not," Vincent replied. Adrian's attention returned to the locket. "May I examine it?" "No, Your Majesty, if the object carries an ancient claim against the throne, the council must determine whether it is genuine." Emily looked up at Vincent. Her voice was barely audible. Vincent lowered the locket into her palm and gently closed her fingers around it. "No one will take anything from you," Adrian exhaled slowly. "Sentiment is dangerous in a king. So is forgetting who wears the crown." The crimson flames rose several inches along the walls. The council fell silent. Vincent had ruled the Night Court for more than 200 years, not because he spoke the loudest, but because every word carried the weight of consequence. He stepped toward Adrian until only a few feet separated them. Julia Bennett was taken from her home tonight. Her daughter traveled 8 miles through a storm because Julia believed this castle would honor an old promise. Before this night ends, I will know who frightened her, who knew about the locket, and why they chose this family. Adrian's expression remained controlled, but Vincent heard the sudden change in his heartbeat. One beat, faster than before, small, almost invisible, enough. Vincent studied him without revealing what he had noticed. "You already know something," he said. Every face in the hall turned toward Adrian. "I know only that the Bennett name appears in sealed records," the counselor answered. "Records unavailable to humans. Yet someone found Julia." Vincent took one more step. Someone knew where she lived. Adrian's calm finally shifted, not fear, calculation. "You are making an accusation without proof." "No, I am asking a question you did not expect." Before Adrian could answer, the captain of the guard entered through the side door, rain covering his dark uniform. He crossed the hall quickly and bowed. "Your Majesty, we found the Bennett house empty. The front door was unlocked. The power line had been cut from outside. No vehicles remained on the property. Emily's cup slipped in her hands. Mrs. Whitmore caught it before it reached the floor. "Was my mom there?" Emily asked. The captain looked at Vincent, uncertain how much to say. Vincent gave a slight nod. "No," the captain answered gently, "but we found this on the kitchen table." He held out a folded piece of paper protected inside a clear evidence sleeve. Vincent opened it. The message contained only 6 words, written in black ink. "Bring the child before dawn, King." Beneath the sentence was a symbol Vincent had not seen since the last war between hunters and the Night Court. A burning eye inside a silver circle. He folded the paper once. "Close every gate," he ordered. "Double the watch along the mountain road. No one enters." Adrian's voice sharpened. "You cannot imprison the council." Vincent looked directly at him. "I can when one of you may have delivered Julia Bennett to our enemies." The great doors locked with a thunderous click. Emily held the locket against her chest. Somewhere beneath the castle, hidden mechanisms began to turn. Stone shifted, chains moved. The old fortress was sealing itself. Vincent looked toward the first hint of grey forming beyond the high windows. Dawn was still hours away, but not enough. Whoever had taken Julia knew the promise, knew the bloodline, and knew exactly how to force the Vampire King to choose between the law he ruled and the child he had sworn to protect. Vincent ordered the Night Council into the West Chamber and placed 2 guards outside its doors. Adrian Vale protested until Vincent turned toward him, and one look ended the argument. Emily remained in the entrance hall with Mrs. Whitmore, wrapped in Vincent's coat and watching the crimson torches burn. The castle had sealed every gate, but Vincent knew walls could not stop a secret that had already entered. He unfolded the message again and studied the burning eye inside the silver circle. The symbol belonged to the Order of St. Veritas, a hunter society that claimed to protect humanity from creatures of the night. Most of its members had disappeared after a peace agreement signed 87 years earlier. Those who remained were not soldiers. They were scholars, politicians, and wealthy families who preferred influence to open conflict. Someone had revived the old mark. Someone wanted him to believe the entire order had returned. Vincent walked to Emily and crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "I need to ask you about the people who came to your house." She nodded, though her hands tightened around the locket. "Did you see their faces?" "Only one, a woman with red glasses." "Did she say anything unusual?" Emily thought carefully. "She told Mom that the promise was over." Vincent's expression hardened. "What did your mother say?" "She said promises do not end just because powerful people get tired of keeping them." For a moment, Vincent heard Eleanor Bennet speaking through the child. The same courage, the same refusal to bow. Mrs. Whitmore looked toward him. "There is only one person in the old records who wore red glasses." Vincent already knew. Dr. Evelyn Cross had once served as a historian for the Night Council. Human, brilliant, entrusted with documents no outsider had ever been allowed to read. 12 years earlier, she had vanished after accusing the council of hiding crimes committed during the old wars. Adrian Vale had ordered her records sealed. Vincent rose. "Open the archive below the chapel." Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. "The Royal Archive has not been opened since your father's reign. Then it has waited long enough." He turned to the captain. "Keep the council inside the West Chamber. Watch Adrian more closely than the others." Emily stood quickly. "I am coming with you." "No, the message asked for me. That is why you are staying here. My mom told me to find you. She did not tell me to hide." Vincent looked down at her. She was frightened, but fear had not made her careless. It had made her determined. He understood that kind of courage. It was often more dangerous than anger. "You may come to the chapel," he said, "but you will remain beside Mrs. Whitmore." The three of them crossed the central hall and climbed a narrow staircase toward the oldest wing of the castle. Rain tapped against stained glass windows. The chapel waited behind two iron doors carved with the merino crest. Inside there were no religious statues, only rows of wooden benches and a stone floor marked by centuries of footsteps. Vincent approached the altar and placed Emily's locket into a circular hollow at its center. The fit was exact. A soft click echoed beneath them. The altar moved aside, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. "Your Majesty," she whispered. "How could a Bennet heirloom open a merino vault?" "Because it was never merely a Bennet heirloom." They descended nearly 50 feet beneath the chapel. At the bottom stood a round chamber lined with shelves. Thousands of sealed letters rested behind glass. In the center was a stone table holding a single wooden box. The same crown and thorn symbol marked its lid. Emily approached slowly. The locket began to glow again. Vincent opened the box. Inside lay a faded agreement signed by his grandfather and a woman named Abigail Bennet in 1791. Beneath their signatures was a clause Vincent had never seen. If either bloodline faced extinction, the surviving house would protect the child who carried the living seal. Mrs. Whitmore read the words twice. "The child," she said. Vincent looked at Emily. "The locket does not respond to your mother. It responds to you." Emily stared at the glowing silver in her hands. "Why?" Vincent turned the document over. A second message had been written on the back in ink that only appeared beneath crimson light. "The living seal does not grant power. It reveals betrayal." At that moment, every glass case in the archive unlocked at once. One letter slid from a shelf and landed on the stone table. Vincent recognized the handwriting immediately. Adrian Vale. The letter was dated 12 years earlier and addressed to Dr. Evelyn Cross. It contained one sentence. "Find the Bennet child before the king learns she exists." Vincent read it in silence. Above them, a warning bell rang through the castle, then another. The captain's voice echoed down the stairway. "Your Majesty, Councillor Vale is gone." Vincent closed his hand around the letter. Adrian had not been trapped inside the castle. He had been waiting for the archive to open. The warning bell rang a third time as Vincent climbed from the archive with Emily and Mrs. Whitmore close behind him. The castle corridors had changed. Crimson flames flickered low. Somewhere above, guards called to one another, but no one could explain how Adrian Vale had escaped a chamber with only one entrance. Vincent could. Adrian had known the castle before Vincent became king. He had helped design the hidden passageways during the restoration of 1894. "Take Emily to the inner library," Vincent told Mrs. Whitmore. "Lock the door from the inside." Emily caught his sleeve. "You said you would find my mum. I will. Then do not send me away when I can help." Vincent looked at the locket glowing against her coat. The living seal had opened the archive and exposed Adrian's letter. It might reveal more, but bringing a child closer to danger was not a choice he would make lightly. "Your mother trusted me to protect you," he said. "Protecting me does not mean pretending I am not part of this." Her answer stopped him. Julia Bennet had raised her daughter to speak with courage even when her voice shook. Vincent understood why the order had failed to frighten Julia into silence. Before he could respond, the captain approached from the eastern stairway. We found the passage behind the west chamber. Vale reached the lower courtyard, but the outer gates remained sealed. Then he is still inside. There is more. A signal came through the old radio tower. Someone outside the mountain perimeter is asking for him. Vincent took the captain's radio. Speaker, then a woman's voice emerged, calm and precise. Adrian, Dawn is approaching. Bring the child to the north gate or Julia Bennet will never return home. Emily turned pale. Vincent lowered the radio before she could hear the message repeated. Dr. Evelyn Cross, Mrs. Whitmore whispered. She is alive. Vincent pressed the transmission button. This is Vincent Marino. The static vanished. For several seconds the woman said nothing. Then she answered. So the king finally opened the archive. You took Julia Bennet. I removed her from a house Adrian Vale had already marked. Vincent glanced toward the letter in his hand. You expect me to believe you protected her? No. I expect you to follow the evidence. Her voice remained steady, but there was strain beneath it. Julia is alive. She is frightened but unharmed. Adrian promised me the living seal would expose the truth about the Night Council. He did not tell me the seal belonged to a 7-year-old child. Emily stepped closer to the radio. Can my mum hear me? Vincent hesitated, then pressed the button again. Dr. Cross let Julia speak. Silence followed. A door opened somewhere on the other end. Soft footsteps approached. Then Julia's voice broke through the static. Emily reached for the radio with both hands. Mum, I am here. Julia released a breath that sounded like she had been holding it for hours. Are you safe? I found Mr. Marino. Vincent noticed that Julia did not sound surprised. Listen to him, she said. Stay inside the castle. I want you home. I know, sweetheart, I am coming back. Another voice interrupted. Adrian Vale. That depends on the king. Vincent's hand tightened around the radio. Where are you? Closer than you think. A loud mechanical click echoed from beneath the floor. The castle lights dimmed. Mrs. Whitmore looked toward the ceiling. The northern ward, she said. Someone is shutting it down. Vincent understood he had never intended to escape the castle. He needed access to its control chamber, a room connected to every protective barrier on the mountain. Dr. Cross was outside with Julia, but Adrian was inside, using both women as leverage. Captain, secure the north gate, Vincent ordered. Do not open it under any condition. The captain left with 2 guards. Vincent turned to Emily. The locket revealed Adrian's letter because he betrayed the promise. It may respond again if we bring it near him. Emily nodded. Then we find him. Mrs. Whitmore started to object, but Vincent raised one hand. She stays beside me. They moved toward the northern tower, following the fading pulse of the locket. With every step, the silver light grew brighter. The passage narrowed until they reached an iron door hidden behind a tapestry. Vincent opened it and found Adrian standing inside the control chamber, one hand resting on an ancient brass lever. Maps of the mountain covered the walls. The northern barrier glowed weakly on a glass panel before him. Adrian looked at Emily, not Vincent. At last, he said, the Bennet child has come to finish what her family began. Emily held the locket against her chest. Its light spread across the room and illuminated a second figure reflected in the glass panel. Someone was standing behind Adrian in the shadows. Vincent stepped forward. The figure removed a dark hood, revealing the face of a councilwoman who had entered the castle beside Adrian. Vincent recognized her as Margaret Voss, the keeper of royal records. The locket flashed once, and hidden words appeared across the wall behind them. 2 names, 2 betrayals. Adrian had not acted alone. The hidden words burned across the wall while the living seal pulsed in Emily's hands. Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss stood beneath their own names, exposed by a promise neither of them had believed still carried power. Vincent entered the control chamber and placed himself between Emily and the 2 councillors. Step away from the lever, he said. Adrian did not move. You think this child has revealed betrayal. She has only awakened a weapon her family never understood. Margaret closed the iron door behind Vincent, but Mrs. Whitmore remained outside with the captain approaching through the passage. Vincent heard every footstep. The seal grants no weapon, he replied. It reveals the truth. Truth is more dangerous than any blade, Margaret said. The locket brightened. New writing appeared beside her name. Keeper of records, destroyer of testimony. Emily stared at the words. You erased something. Margaret's expression changed. She had expected judgment from a king, not a child. I preserved peace, she said. There is a difference. Vincent looked at the glass panel where the northern barrier weakened by the second. You erased the Bennet agreement. We buried it, Adrian answered. Your grandfather tied the throne to a human bloodline. Every inherited an obligation to strangers. We chose to end that mistake. By hunting Julia and Emily? By finding the seal before the Order of St. Veritas did. Vincent lifted the radio. Dr. Cross already has Julia. Adrian gave a thin smile. Evelyn believes she rescued her. She does not know Margaret has controlled the Order for 12 years. The locket flashed again. Across the wall appeared another line. The burning eye serves the keeper. Margaret moved toward the control panel, but Vincent reached it first and lowered the brass steadied. Blue light returned across the map of the mountain. The gates remain closed, he said. Julia remains outside, Adrian replied. Then open them, Emily said. 3 adults looked at her. She stood beside Vincent, still wrapped in his coat, rainwater drying in her hair. My mother is not your enemy. Dr. Cross is not your enemy either. You made them afraid of each other because you wanted everyone to listen to you. Margaret's voice softened. Emily, you are too young to understand what your mother carries. I understand that she told me to ask for help. The simple answer filled the chamber. Vincent had heard kings defend cruelty with history, duty, and survival. Emily answered with trust. That was why people like Margaret feared her. The locket did not create truth. It made excuses impossible. The captain reached the doorway with 4 guards. Vincent did not turn. Take both counselors to the East Tower. They are to be guarded separately. Adrian finally stepped away from the laver. You cannot judge us without the full archive. I will not, Vincent said. The full council will. Margaret looked toward Emily. Before dawn, the Order will bring Julia to the North Gate. If you open it, they enter. If you keep it closed, Julia remains with them. That is the choice. No, Vincent said. That is the choice you prepared. I will make another. The guards escorted Adrian and Margaret from the chamber. As Margaret crossed the threshold, leaving only one word glowing behind her name, fear, Vincent studied it, then turned to the mountain map. The old service road reached the north ridge without crossing the main gate. It had been abandoned after a rock slide in 1926, but a narrow section still remained beneath the forest. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, bring the Royal Archive map. She returned moments later carrying a leather case. Vincent opened it across the control table. The service road appeared as a faded line leading to an abandoned observatory half a mile beyond the barrier. Dr. Cross will choose a location with a clear signal and a protected view, he said. She is at the observatory. Emily looked at the map. How do we reach her? There is a tunnel beneath the northern wall. The captain shook his head. It was sealed 70 years ago. Vincent placed his hand beside the crown and thorn symbol carved into the map. It was sealed to everyone except the 2 families who built it. He looked at Emily's locket. The silver surface had changed. A tiny path now glowed across it, matching the forgotten road. Emily understood before anyone spoke. It is showing us the way. Vincent knelt beside her. You have already done more than anyone had the right to ask. You will remain here while I bring Julia home. Emily looked directly into his eyes. Will you promise? Vincent had once made that promise to Eleanor Bennet and allowed time to convince him the debt had ended. He would not make the same mistake twice. I promise. The locket opened, and a narrow beam of light crossed the chamber floor. Stones shifted beneath the northern wall. A concealed doorway appeared. Cold air moved from the darkness beyond it, carrying the faint scent of pine and morning rain. Vincent rose and handed Emily back to Mrs. Whitmore's care. Then he entered the passage with the captain and 2 guards. Behind him, Emily called his name. Vincent turned. My mom says the safest place can look frightening from far away, she said. Make sure she knows she was right. Vincent faced the tunnel. Somewhere beyond the mountain wall, Julia Bennet was waiting. Dawn was less than 2 hours away, and for the first time in 600 years, the Vampire King was leaving his castle not to defend a throne, but to keep a promise to a child. The tunnel beneath the northern wall had not carried footsteps in 70 years. Dust covered the stones, roots pressed through the ceiling, and cold water ran in narrow streams along the floor. Vincent moved without hesitation, following the faint silver light that appeared whenever Emily's locket pulsed inside the castle behind him. The captain and 2 guards kept several feet back. None of them spoke. Above the tunnel, the storm weakened, but the first pale edge of morning had begun to form beyond the mountains. Vincent could feel it approaching. The light would not destroy him, but it would drain his strength, and whoever waited at the observatory had chosen the hour carefully. After nearly half a mile, the passage ended at a rusted iron door. Vincent placed his palm against the crown and thorn symbol carved into its center. The lock released. Pine-scented air entered the tunnel. Beyond the door stood the abandoned observatory. a round stone building overlooking the valley. Its copper dome had turned green with age, and several windows were covered with wooden boards. A black vehicle waited beside the road. No one guarded it. That concerned Vincent more than an army would have. He signaled for the guards to circle the building while he approached the entrance alone. The door opened before he touched it. Dr. Evelyn Cross stood inside, wearing red-framed glasses and a grey coat. She looked older than the portrait in the council records, but her eyes remained sharp. "You came through the Bennett passage," she said. "I wondered whether the castle still remembered. Where is Julia?" Evelyn stepped aside. Julia Bennett stood near an old telescope beneath the cracked dome. Her hands were free. She wore the same blue sweater Emily had described, and although exhaustion shadowed her face, she stood straight when Vincent entered. For one silent second they studied each other. Julia had expected a monster from an old family story. Vincent had expected Eleanor Bennett's distant descendant. Instead, he saw a tired mother who had surrendered her own safety to give her child a chance. "Is Emily safe?" Julia asked. "She is inside the castle with Mrs. Whitmore." Relief crossed her face so quickly that Vincent almost missed it. "Did she make it there alone?" 8 miles through the storm. Julia closed her eyes. "I should never have asked that of her. She believes you gave her something important to do. She is 7. She is also the reason your family's promise was found." Evelyn closed the observatory door. "This reunion will have to wait. Adrian Vale contacted me before you opened the archive. He said Margaret Voss had ordered Julia's removal and that the castle was no longer secure. Adrian worked with Margaret. I know that now." Evelyn removed a small recorder from her coat and placed it on a table. Adrian's voice filled the room. He spoke of finding the Bennett child, controlling the living seal, and forcing Vincent to open records hidden beneath the chapel. The recording ended with Margaret ordering Evelyn to bring Julia to the north gate before dawn. "Why did you obey?" Vincent asked. "Because 12 years ago, Margaret gave me evidence that the Night Council had erased human families from its protection records. I believed she wanted the truth exposed." Evelyn looked toward Julia. "Last night, I realized the evidence was bait. She needed a human historian without alarming local authorities." Julia's expression hardened. "You entered my house under false pretenses." "Yes." "You frightened my daughter." Evelyn lowered her eyes. "Yes." The admission carried no excuse. Vincent listened to her heartbeat and heard regret, but regret did not erase responsibility. "You will testify before the full council," he said. "You will surrender every record Margaret gave you." "I already sent copies to 3 newspapers and a federal judge." The captain entered through a side door. "Your Majesty, the area is clear, but a second vehicle is approaching from the eastern road." Evelyn looked toward the boarded window. "That will be Margaret's people. They expect me to hand over Julia." Vincent turned to the old telescope. Its brass base carried the crown and thorn symbol. "This observatory belonged to Abigail Bennett," he said. Julia stared at him. "My family owned this place?" "Your family helped build the mountain defenses. The tunnel was designed as an escape route, not an entrance." He pressed the symbol. The floor beneath the telescope opened, revealing a narrow staircase. "It leads back beneath the barrier." Julia stepped toward it, then stopped. "What about Evelyn? She comes with us." Evelyn looked surprised. "You trust me?" "No, I trust the evidence you carry, and I will not leave you for Margaret to silence." A distant engine grew louder outside. Vincent guided Julia toward the hidden stairway. Before descending, she turned to him. "Emily said the safest place in the world could look frightening from far away." Vincent met her eyes. "She asked me to tell you that you were right." Julia's fear softened for the first time that night. Then the 4 of them entered the passage, and the stone floor closed above them. As footsteps reached the observatory, Vincent led Julia Bennett beneath the mountain toward her daughter, carrying proof that the enemy threatening both families had never been outside the castle walls. It had been seated beside his throne for years. The passage returned them to Marino Castle just as the storm faded into a cold grey dawn. Julia climbed the final steps with Vincent close behind her, one hand braced against the stone wall. She had not slept. Her sweater was damp, her face pale, but the moment the hidden door opened into the northern control chamber, she heard Emily calling from the corridor. "Mom!" Emily ran past Mrs. Whitmore and crossed the room before anyone could stop her. Julia dropped to her knees and gathered her daughter into her arms. For several seconds, nothing else in the castle mattered. Emily pressed her face against Julia's shoulder. Julia held her tightly, whispering that she was safe, that she was sorry, and that she would never send her away alone again. Vincent stood near the doorway and watched in silence. 6 centuries had taught him how quickly fear could become anger and how easily power could turn grief into punishment. Yet Julia did not demand revenge. She only checked Emily's hands, her face, and the yellow coat beneath Vincent's larger black one. "Did anyone hurt you?" Julia asked. Emily shook her head. "Mr. Marino gave me warm milk. Mrs. Whitmore found dry socks. The castle showed us where you were." Julia looked up at Vincent. "Thank you." The words were quiet, but they carried more weight than any oath spoken in the throne room. "The promise required it," he said. Julia rose slowly. "No, a promise may have opened the door. You chose what happened after." Before Vincent could answer, the remaining members of the Night Council entered under guard. Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss were brought from separate towers. Evelyn Cross placed the recorder, letters, and copied records on the central table. The living seal glowed against Emily's chest as everyone gathered. Vincent faced the council. For generations, the Bennett Agreement was hidden. Protection records were altered. Human families were removed from royal safeguards. Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss used the Order of St. Brutus to locate the Bennett heir and gain access to the sealed archive. Margaret lifted her chin. "We acted to protect the Night Court from human influence." The locket flashed. Words appeared across the stone wall behind her. The court was never threatened by the Bennets. The court was threatened by the truth. No one spoke. Evelyn opened a leather folder and removed the oldest surviving document from Abigail Bennett's collection. "The original agreement was not created because the Marino family owed a debt," she said. "That is only half of it." Vincent took the page. The handwriting belonged to his grandfather, but a second passage had been added by Abigail. He read aloud. "The Bennett bloodline shall preserve the conscience of the crown. The Marino line shall protect the Bennett heirs. Neither family shall rule the other. Together they shall prevent fear from becoming law." Julia looked at Emily's locket. So the living seal was never meant to make her powerful. "No," Vincent said. "It was meant to make hidden choices visible." Adrian gave a bitter laugh. "A child cannot judge a kingdom." Emily looked at him. "I did not judge you. The truth did." The crimson light moved across the wall. More names appeared, followed by erased records, false orders, and payments made through shell foundations controlled by Margaret. Every hidden decision surfaced in clear lines of light. Several council members stepped away from Adrian and Margaret. One lowered his head. Another removed the silver council crest from her coat and placed it on the table. Vincent turned to the captain. "Place Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss under formal guard until an open tribunal can be held. Their evidence will be reviewed by the full council, human authorities, and Dr. Cross." Margaret's composure finally broke. "You would expose our world to humans?" "I will expose wrongdoing to those harmed by it. That will weaken the throne." Vincent looked toward Julia and Emily. "A throne protected by lies is already weak." The guards escorted the 2 former councillors away. No one tried to stop them. As the doors closed, the living seal dimmed until it looked like an ordinary silver locket again. Emily touched it carefully. "Is it finished?" Julia knelt beside her. "The worst part is," Vincent looked at the records spread across the table. "The truth is known, but the damage remains. Families lost protection. Trust was broken." Julia met his gaze. "Then we repair it." She spoke as though the answer were simple, but everyone in the room understood it would require courage from both worlds. Vincent nodded once. Together. Outside the high windows, the first light of morning reached the mountain. For the first time in generations, it entered Marino Castle without being treated as an enemy. By noon, Marino Castle no longer felt like a fortress hiding from the world. It felt like a courthouse waiting for the truth to arrive. Vincent ordered the Great Hall opened, not only to the Night Council, but also to representatives from Hollow Creek, federal investigators contacted by Evelyn Cross, and several families whose names had been erased from the protection records. Julia sat beside Emily near the long windows while Mrs. Whitmore brought them breakfast. Emily had changed into a dry navy sweater and borrowed shoes, but Vincent's black coat still rested around her shoulders. She said it made her feel safe. Vincent pretended not to hear. On the raised platform, Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss stood beneath guard while the recovered documents were arranged across a 12-foot table. No chains were displayed. No threats were made. Vincent wanted judgment to come from evidence, not fear. Evelyn began with the oldest records. She explained how the original agreement between the Marino and Bennett families had created a network of protected human households across the country. These families had once helped preserve peace, warned the Night Court about dangerous factions, and sheltered innocent vampires during periods of public panic. Over time, Margaret had removed hundreds of names from the registry. Adrian had redirected the protection funds into private foundations. Then they had used the Order of St. Veritas to frighten both humans and vampires into believing the other side was preparing for war. Conflict made them necessary, Evelyn said. Peace made them ordinary. Adrian looked toward Vincent. You cannot govern immortals by trusting human courts. Vincent remained standing beside the empty throne. I am not asking human courts to govern us. I am allowing them to see crimes committed against human citizens. Margaret turned to the council members. Once these records leave the castle, secrecy ends. Every agreement becomes vulnerable. Julia rose before Vincent could answer. Her voice was calm, but it reached every corner of the hall. Secrecy protected my daughter until the people responsible for enforcing it decided she was useful. That is not protection, that is ownership. Emily looked up at her mother with quiet pride. The locket at her throat gave a faint silver glow. Across the wall behind Margaret, a final hidden record appeared. It was not a list of names, it was a transfer order signed 3 days earlier. The order instructed Dr. Cross to bring Julia to the observatory and directed another team to enter the Bennett house after Emily escaped. Their purpose was clear. They planned to place false evidence inside the home and blame Julia's disappearance on the order. Evelyn tended to accuse me. You were never their partner, Julia said. You were their next witness to silence. Evelyn removed her red-framed glasses and closed her eyes for a moment. When she looked again, regret had become resolve. She handed the federal investigator a small drive containing every message she had received from Adrian and Margaret. There are copies in 3 secure locations, she said. Nothing can be erased now. One by one, the remaining council members placed their silver crests on the table. They voted to remove Adrian and Margaret from office, surrender financial records, restore every deleted family to the protection registry, and establish an independent council with both human and vampire representatives. The decision did not repair the damage, but it ended the system that had allowed it. Adrian's shoulders lowered. Margaret looked toward Emily. Do you understand what your locket has done? Emily touched the silver cover. It has weakened an ancient kingdom. Vincent stepped down from the platform. No, it reminded the kingdom why it was created. The great doors opened, and daylight spread across the marble floor. Vincent paused at its edge. The sun weakened him, but he did not retreat. You do not have to stand there, she said. Yes, Vincent answered. Today I do. Together, they watched the investigators escort Adrian and Margaret from the hall to face a lawful tribunal. No crowd shouted, no one celebrated. Justice entered quietly, carried by documents, testimony, and a child who had refused to let fear decide where she could ask for help. Emily joined them and slipped her hand into Julia's. Then she reached for Vincent's hand as well. For a moment he looked at her small fingers around his. The Night Council watched. The townspeople watched. Vincent closed his hand gently. The living seal warmed, but no hidden words appeared. There were no more betrayals left in the room, only 3 people standing in the morning light, preparing to repair what generations of silence had broken. The first week after the tribunal did not feel like victory. It felt like work. Marino Castle became a place of meetings, signatures, and difficult conversations. Records had to be restored, families had to be contacted, funds had to be returned. Every decision Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss had hidden now had to be examined in daylight. Vincent attended each session, even when the sun through the high windows weakened him. He refused to rule from the shadows while asking others to trust him. Julia noticed. She also noticed that he never complained. On the 4th afternoon, she found him alone in the library, standing beside a table covered with old protection ledgers. Emily was downstairs helping Mrs. Whitmore label boxes of restored family records. You have not rested, Julia said. Vincent looked up. Neither have you. I am human. I have excuses. I have 600 years of practice. Julia almost smiled, but the expression faded when she saw the list in front of him. More than 200 names had been removed from the registry. Can all of them be found? She asked. Some have moved. Some changed their names. Some no longer believe the Night Court ever intended to protect them. Can you blame them? No. Vincent closed the ledger. That is the problem. Julia stepped closer to the table. Trust is not repaired by asking people to forget. Then how is it repaired? By giving them reasons not to be afraid of tomorrow. Vincent studied her. Few people spoke to him without caution. Julia did not speak carelessly, but she did speak honestly. It was different. The council wants me to issue a decree, he said. A royal apology followed by new laws. That is a beginning. You do not think it is enough. Words from a king matter, but people will watch what you do after the words. Vincent turned toward the windows. Hollow Creek lay far below the mountain, small houses and church steeples surrounded by late autumn trees. My father believed distance created safety. He taught me that humans feared what they understood and destroyed what they feared. Was he wrong? Not always. That does not make him right forever. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It carried the weight of two people trying to understand what history had demanded from them. Julia touched the edge of the ledger, opened the school records. Vincent looked back at her. What? Hollow Creek Elementary lost its after-school program last year. Several families in this registry live within 30 miles. Some are human, some might not be. Children do not need to inherit this fear. Vincent understood before she finished. A shared program. Tutoring, meals, transportation, history taught without lies. Nothing secret, nothing political. Just useful. The council will call it reckless. The council called my daughter dangerous. Vincent's expression changed, almost becoming amusement. You argue like Eleanor Bennett. I will assume that is a compliment. That evening, Vincent called the council into the great hall. Julia and Emily stood near the front as he announced the Marino Foundation for Shared Futures, a public trust funded by assets recovered from Adrian and Margaret's private accounts. It would support schools, medical clinics, and legal aid for every family harmed by the erased records. Human administrators would control the public funds. Vampire representatives would have no authority to remove names in secret. Every decision would be independently reviewed. Several council members objected. One warned that openness would expose the night court. Another said humans would take advantage of royal generosity. Vincent listened without interruption. Then Emily raised her hand as though she were sitting in a classroom. May I say something? The room went quiet. Vincent nodded. Emily stepped beside him. When I came here, I did not know what vampires were supposed to be. I only knew my mum needed help. Mr. Marino helped because he promised. Maybe people would be less scared if they knew promises mattered more than what someone was. No ancient speech followed. None was needed. The council approved the foundation by a clear majority. Later, when the hall had emptied, Vincent found Emily asleep in a chair beside Julia. Julia lifted her carefully. She believes everything can be fixed, she whispered. Children often do. Is that foolish? Vincent opens a responsibility. He walked with Julia through the quiet corridor toward the guest rooms. At the final doorway, Julia paused. You kept your promise to bring me home. You are still in my castle. Home is not always a building. Vincent looked at Emily sleeping safely against her mother's shoulder. For the first time, he understood exactly what she meant. 3 weeks later, the gates of Marino Castle opened before sunset for the first public gathering in its history. Cars climbed the mountain road in a slow line carrying teachers, parents, local officials and families whose names had recently been restored to the protection registry. Some arrived with curiosity. Others carried the careful expressions of people who had learned not to trust powerful institutions. Vincent greeted each guest in the great hall without guards standing beside him. He wore a dark suit, but no crown and no royal crest. Julia had told him that trust grew faster when people did not feel they were being summoned before a throne. Vincent had listened. The Marino Foundation had already restored the after-school program at Hollow Creek Elementary. A shuttle now carried children from homes as far as 25 miles away. The school kitchen served dinner 4 evenings a week, and the library remained open until 8 o'clock for families without reliable internet access. None of it was called charity. Julia insisted that dignity mattered as much as assistance. Emily stood near the entrance handing out small cards she had decorated with silver stars. Each card carried the same sentence: everyone deserves a safe door. Most guests smiled when they read it. A few looked toward Vincent with quiet understanding. Evelyn Cross arrived carrying 2 boxes of documents for the new public archive. She had testified before both the Night Council and federal investigators. Her cooperation did not erase the fear she had caused, but Julia had encouraged her to help repair what she had helped disturb. Accountability without a path forward becomes another locked room, Julia had said. Evelyn now served as an independent historian, supervised by both human and vampire representatives. Her first task was to create an accurate record of every family removed from protection. In the council chamber, the old silver chairs had been rearranged into a circle. 6 human members and 6 vampire members took their places, with Vincent seated among them rather than above them. Julia occupied the chair beside him as the elected representative for Hollow Creek families. The final seat belonged to no official. It remained smaller than the others and was reserved for a youth observer. Emily sat there with a notebook on her lap and her feet unable to reach the floor. "This council will not govern through secrecy," Vincent said when the meeting began. "No family will be added, removed, watched, or restricted without notice and independent review. Every protection order will carry an expiration date and a public explanation." One council member asked whether full openness might endanger vampire communities living quietly among humans. Julia answered before Vincent could. "Privacy is not the same as secrecy. Privacy protects ordinary lives. Secrecy protects people who refuse to explain their choices." The motion passed without objection. The next vote established a permanent mediation office in Hollow Creek, where disputes between human and vampire residents could be resolved without intimidation. Another vote restored emergency funds to 32 families. By the end of the evening, every reform proposed after the tribunal had been approved. When the meeting ended, the guests moved into the courtyard. Long tables stood beneath strings of warm lights. Mrs. Whitmore had prepared enough food for 200 people, including dishes for guests whose diets required careful consideration. Children ran between the stone fountains, while their parents spoke with people they might once have avoided. Vincent remained near the castle steps, watching the distance between two worlds become smaller through ordinary conversation. Julia joined him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one before remembering he did not drink it. "I am still learning," she said. Vincent accepted the cup anyway. "So am I." Emily raced across the courtyard carrying a paper certificate. "Mom, Mr. Marino, look." The school principal had named her the first student ambassador for the shared program. Vincent read the certificate carefully. "This appears to be an important office." "Very important," Emily said. "I have to make sure nobody sits alone at dinner." Vincent glanced across the courtyard. "That may be the most useful position created tonight." Emily hurried away to perform her duties. Julia watched her approach a quiet vampire boy near the fountain and invite him to join a group of children. He hesitated, then followed. "She makes it look easy," Julia said. "She does not carry 600 years of reasons to fear someone. Neither did you when you opened the door for her." Vincent looked toward the mountain road, where the darkness no longer seemed to separate the castle from the town below. "I opened a door because of an old debt." Julia shook her head. "You kept it open because you chose to." Music drifted across the courtyard. No royal anthem played. No one bowed. For the first time, Marino Castle was filled with voices that did not lower when Vincent entered. He had once believed respect required distance. Now he understood that distance had only protected his loneliness. Emily called for them from the center table. Julia held out her hand, not as a subject asking permission, but as an equal inviting him forward. Vincent looked at it for one quiet moment before taking it. Together they walked into the light, where both worlds had finally begun to meet without fear. Winter settled over Hollow Creek without closing the road to Marino Castle. Snow covered the mountain in quiet white layers, but the gates remained open every afternoon until 8 o'clock. School shuttles climbed the winding road 4 days a week, carrying students to the new library, music rooms, and science lab built inside the castle's unused east wing. Emily called it the highest after-school program in America. Vincent never corrected her. He had converted rooms that once stored royal furniture into places where children painted, studied, and argued over board games. The first time he heard laughter echo beneath the old stone arches, he stopped in the corridor and listened as though the sound belonged to a language he had forgotten. Julia found him there. "You look worried," she said. "I am surrounded by 23 children carrying glue. That is reasonable." He looked through the open doorway. Emily sat at a table beside the quiet vampire boy she had welcomed during the courtyard gathering. His name was Noah Hale, and he had spent most of his life-changing schools whenever people noticed that he never ate lunch and avoided bright windows. At Marino Castle, no one asked him to pretend. Emily was helping him build a cardboard bridge, although neither child appeared to understand engineering. "She has given him confidence," Vincent said. "He gave her patience," Julia replied. "That bridge has collapsed 4 times. Vincent almost smiled. Over the previous 2 months, Julia had become a familiar presence in the castle. She continued teaching at Hollow Creek Elementary, but she spent 2 evenings each week overseeing the shared program. She challenged council policies and refused every formal title Vincent offered her. When he suggested that she accept payment as a royal advisor, she negotiated a public salary through the foundation instead. "No private favors," she had told him, "not even from a king." Vincent respected her more, each time she disagreed with him. Their conversations often continued long after the meetings ended, spoke about history, parenting, responsibility, and the strange loneliness of making decisions for other people. Julia never treated his age as wisdom by itself. Vincent never treated her ordinary life as small. One evening near Christmas, the last shuttle left early because heavy snow was moving across the county. Emily stayed at the castle while Julia finished reviewing the foundation's annual budget. When they reached the entrance hall, the wind had already covered the road with several inches of snow. "You should remain here tonight," Vincent said. Julia looked through the tall windows. That sounded dangerously close to an order. It was a weather report. "You are improving." Mrs. Whitmore prepared 2 guest rooms and hot chocolate for Emily. Later, Julia found Vincent in the chapel, standing before the stone altar where the locket had opened the hidden archive. The crown and thorn symbol had been restored, but the secret staircase beneath it now remained permanently unlocked. Every recovered agreement could be examined by authorized historians from both communities. "Do you ever wish the door had stayed closed?" Julia asked. Vincent did not pretend to misunderstand. "The archive door? Any of them." He looked toward the rows of empty benches. "For centuries I believed keeping doors closed prevented loss. Then Emily arrived and proved that a closed door can become its own kind of loss." Julia stood beside him. She was terrified that night. So was I. Julia turned, surprised. "You did not look afraid. I had more practice hiding it." The chapel was silent except for the wind against the stained glass. Vincent reached into his coat and removed the silver locket. Emily had asked him to keep it safe during art class after nearly dropping it into blue paint. "The seal has not awakened since the tribunal," he said, "because there is nothing left to reveal, because its purpose was fulfilled." Julia touched the edge of the locket. Their hands met briefly around the silver. Neither moved away. There was no urgency in the moment, no demand, and no promise made too quickly. Only trust that had grown through work, honesty, and the daily choice to remain present. "What happens to the agreement now?" Julia asked. "The protection clause remains, but not as a debt. The new council voted to make it mutual. So the Bennets protect the Marinos too? Apparently my family requires supervision." Julia smiled. "That seems fair." Footsteps rushed through the chapel corridor. Emily appeared in the doorway wearing flannel pajamas and carrying 3 paper snowflakes. "Mrs. Whitmore says the power might go out." Vincent looked at the glowing wall lamps. "The castle has its own generator." "I know, but she also says storms are better with blankets." Emily handed 1 snowflake to Julia and another to Vincent. On his, she had written 1 word in silver crayon: home. Vincent stared at it longer than necessary. Emily took his hand and pulled him toward the hallway. Julia followed on his other side. Together they returned to the warm library, where blankets waited beside the fireplace and snow covered the world beyond the windows. Vincent had spent centuries believing immortality meant watching every home disappear. That night, sitting beside Julia while Emily slept safely between them, he began to understand that home was not something time gave or took away. It was something people chose to build, one open door at a time. By the following spring, the mountain road no longer ended at a place people feared. It ended at a place where children carried backpacks through open gates, where teachers shared coffee with council members, and where the old bells of Marino Castle rang every morning at 8 o'clock to welcome the first school shuttle. The public archive had completed its review of every hidden record. All 217 families removed from protection had been located or legally represented. Their names were restored, their stolen funds returned, and their histories preserved in both human and vampire records. Adrian Vale and Margaret Voss received permanent removal from the Night Council and were placed under supervised confinement after open hearings conducted by both communities. The remaining members approved rules preventing any future council from erasing agreements, redirecting public funds, or acting against a family without independent review. Dr. Evelyn Cross testified fully, surrendered every private file, and continued her work as an archivist under public oversight. She never asked Julia to forget what had happened. She only asked for the chance to spend the rest of her career telling the truth. Julia gave her that chance without pretending forgiveness required trust to return overnight. The Order of St. Veritas was formally dissolved. Its legitimate historical collections were transferred to the shared archive, while its remaining members were offered a choice between peaceful civic work and permanent exclusion from council affairs. No secret faction remained beyond the final page. No hidden enemy waited behind another door. The truth had been uncovered, judged, and placed where it could never disappear again. On a clear evening in May, families from Hollow Creek gathered in the castle courtyard for the official dedication of the Bennett Marino Learning Center. Julia stood beside Emily beneath strings of warm lights while Noah Hale and a group of students unveiled a wooden sign they had painted themselves. The letters were uneven, and one corner carried a blue handprint that no one had managed to remove. Julia said it made the sign perfect. Vincent addressed the crowd without standing above them. He announced that the castle and its grounds would remain protected public spaces, open to all registered community programs. He also declared the old blood agreement complete. The Marino family no longer owed the Bennetts a debt, and the Bennetts no longer carried responsibility for the conscience of a crown. From that day forward, both families would stand together by choice rather than obligation. Emily touched the silver locket at her neck. For the first time since the night she crossed the mountain, it opened without glowing. Inside, the painted portrait of Eleanor Bennett and the younger Vincent remained unchanged, but the engraved words had transformed. When darkness comes, knock had become when morning comes, open. Vincent read the new message and understood that the living seal had finished its work. He removed the locket from Emily's hands and returned it gently. It belongs to you now, he said. Not because you are required to carry a promise, but because you proved what it means. Emily looked up at him. Does that mean nobody will come after us again? Vincent answered without mystery or hesitation. It means the people who did have been stopped. The laws that allowed them to act have been changed, and everyone who protects those laws now answers to the public. You and your mother are safe. Emily accepted the answer, then ran to join her friends near the fountain. Later, when the courtyard grew quiet and the final guests began driving down the mountain, Vincent found Julia beneath the archway where Emily had first entered the castle. There is one matter left unresolved, he said. Julia raised an eyebrow. I thought we completed the entire reform list. This is not council business. He held out a small key made of dark silver. It opened no throne room and carried no royal crest. There is a cottage on the east grounds, half a mile from the school wing. It has 3 bedrooms, a garden, and no ancient portraits watching the dining table. I would like you and Emily to make it your home, but only if you wish to. Julia looked at the key, then at him. Is this another form of protection? No, it is an invitation. And what exactly are you inviting us into? Vincent met her eyes with the honesty she had demanded from him since the beginning. A life built slowly. No debt, no command, no promise beyond what we choose each day. Julia closed her fingers around the key. 1 year later, beneath the same archway, Julia Bennett and Vincent Marino exchanged vows before both communities. There was no royal spectacle, only family, friends, children, and warm lights along the stone walls. Emily stood between them, holding the locket and smiling so brightly that even the oldest vampires looked away to hide their emotion. When the ceremony ended, Vincent opened the great door himself. Morning light reached across the entrance hall. Julia took his hand. Emily took the other. Together they walked into the courtyard where their shared future waited, and the castle that had once guarded 600 years of silence finally became a home.